Great.
Okay, go live. My name is Dr. Grace Telesco. My name is Dr. Grace Telesco. My name is Dr. Grace Telesco. I'm joined by Dr. Teresa Lily White, Dr. Lenore Walker, Mr. Ed Dentzel. Investigation with Dr. T is something that actually was the brainchild of our dean, Dr. Durham. And now, coming up this next season, we're going to be doing it almost weekly, a weekly show on a Thursday night. So lots of really cool guests. It's not just police topics, it's not just corrections topics, but it's topics that are affecting us in kind of all areas. But one of the things that we hope to get across is raising awareness, educating about some of these really important topics like human trafficking, topics like disasters. We did a show, Confessions of a Serial Killer. So for this upcoming season, we've got a couple of really cool things. We're going to have a day in the life of a DEA agent. Another really cool one, which is really close to my heart, is going to be on September 11th. Because not only do we want to talk about 9/11 and the work of the NYPD, but I also want to really look at the mental health outcomes. We also have the human trafficking panel. We are going to bring back our Brevard Sheriff, Sheriff Wayne Ivey. It's always a pleasure to have him on. We're going to have Unfound again, Ed Dentzel. He'll be coming back a few times, and that's going to be really exciting and interesting too. My name is Dr. Grace. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our regular program, Investigation with Dr. T. And I am Dr. Grace Telesco. And tonight, very psyched to have, as always, one of our favorites. I guess I can't, this is like when you have a kid, you can't say you have a favorite, right? You can't. You're not supposed to do that. But you can like whisper it to the kid, But anyway, in case any of our other guests are watching, they're going to be like, what? I thought I was the favorite. But anyway, Ed, you and I have a really special connection. I believe that you were the second guest that I ever had. The first one was Desmond Meade, and then you, and then now it's every month, and it's just wonderful. And we really appreciate your fan base, your followers. We appreciate what you do. Please come on. I know I told you to shut your camera, but now I want you to bring it on.
Here I
Bring
am.
it on. There you are. All right. Awesome. Awesome. So we're excited about tonight for a lot of reasons. You want to tell our viewers like why you decided to suggest this particular case.
Sure.
But I guess before we go there, you want to talk about something that's like kind of an update in terms of the cases that you've been following, and I think one that we actually had on our show.
Yes, that was some pretty good timing, I guess, that we had in November when we had talked about the Colonial Parkway murders. And in fact, since then, two of them have been solved scientifically, and that would be David Knobling and Robin Edwards. If you remember, just a very short recap. David Knobling was 20, Robin Edwards was only 14, and he had a pregnant girlfriend, but he met this Robin Edwards, this 14-year-old, and they went parking. And in process of doing that, somebody came along and took them out of the truck and eventually executed them, shot them in the head execution style in 1987. We talked about that back in November. Well, since then, through DNA, they've been able to determine that a guy whose name is Alan Wade Wilmer Sr., who died in 2017, was most certainly the murderer of David and Robin. In fact, Alan has now been connected to another murder of just a woman by herself who was never thought to be connected to the murders of David and Robin at all. Right there, once again, in that Colonial Parkway area of Virginia. So that just happened within the last few weeks. And it's still kind of unclear to me how they came to him. But now, of course, they're trying to connect him to the murders of the two women in 1986, the year before, and then the disappearances that occurred of Keith Call and Sandra Haley in 1988, and the other murders we discussed that happened in 1989. Not sure what to think of it right now. Of course, I put out my theory back in November, may have been off, but I still think with regards to these other murders and disappearances, we may have a ways to go. But as far as David and Robin, they are 100% sure that Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. did this. And what's interesting about it is that they could not find any place, anywhere in any state that he'd ever committed a crime anywhere.
Wow.
So
interesting. What's
yeah.
your theory on that? I know you don't like theories, but
I'm just really not. I think it's still too early on. I think I would like to know, is there any proof that Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. knew David Knobling or his family, or Robin Edwards and her family? Was this really, really, really just something random? Or was it something else? I don't think anybody knows that right at the second. All we know is scientifically, being that we now know that Robin Edwards was, by the way, was raped. That was not something that I don't think that was common knowledge till now, that Alan had raped her, and that's the DNA they used to connect him. Why it took all these years, I don't know. But I really can't say what my theory is. I usually shy away from just coincidences, some guy just showing up and killing two people, but no facts rule that out right now.
yeah. Wow. Has a
Yeah.
little bit similarities with the Son of Sam.
Yeah.
Serial killer. You know, he would go up to the lovebirds making out and kill them both.
That's right.
If
Now,
you
what is
remember the Son
also
of
what has
Sam.
also been alleged is that, and once again, it's been so many years, it's weird how facts can get twisted around and everything. Allegedly, at one point, Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. was seen as a possibility in the disappearances of Keith and Sandra. The issue, though, is Keith and Sandra went missing the year later. So I'm wondering if they thought maybe he killed David and Robin in 1987, but couldn't prove it. And then when Keith and Sandra went missing the next year, they start thinking, well, we need to look at this guy because we believe he did it killed these people the year before. And so we need to look at him. Is that how it started? Or was there something independent that led them to think that Alan Wilmer was connected to Keith and Sandra? That's still very unclear. And I think there's maybe some confirmation bias going on right now.
Yeah. Interesting. I'd like to know why it took that long. We'd have to ask one of our guests that are coming, Sharon Plotkin, Dr. Sharon Plotkin, who's a forensic expert. She's been on the show a couple of times. She's coming back again. I don't remember exactly what the date is, but of course my wonderful production crew would know when that is. But in any event, we could ask her that question. I think that's a good one. Justin and Layla, maybe you could make a note that we can ask that to Dr. Plotkin, like why did it take so long to get this DNA analysis done, or
and like I
to
said,
get the report on it anyway?
Yeah, and the guy's dead, so and he's not going to be able to at least answer here in the material world for those murders.
Yeah. So what made you decide? Because we go into this thing, both of us. What do you want to do it on? You have so many cases, and
Yes.
it's always good, I think, for you to do one that you already have done on Unfound, maybe not recently. But this way, it's not a lot of extra work for you, because I know that if there's a new case, there's probably a good, I want to say solid 50 hours maybe that you probably put into it.
I don't know if it's that many, but I never want to come to the microphone and make an idiot of myself. So I do quite a bit of studying. And of course, tonight's disappearance, Sneha Phillips, is not one that has been covered on Unfound. So I really had to go back and go to newspapers.com and read about what people were saying at the time, what people were saying about through the years, watch some YouTube, other videos that have been covered her disappearance, and of course, Wikipedia and other places. And then, given that I'm a specialist in disappearances, try to think through it in the way that I think about disappearances, which may be unique compared to everybody else. And so that does take some time, but I'm the one that ran the idea by you at some point last year. And you thought that that would be good, mainly because I'm the disappearance guy. And of course, you experienced 9/11 personally. You were there. And I just thought, well, it'd be an interesting combination to give your idea about your insight into people other than police officers and firefighters, who we know so many died on September 11th, other people, nurses, doctors, other people who went down there, but then who also died when the two towers fell, because that's what is the accepted story for Sneha Phillips today, Philip today. And we're just going to look at all of this and eventually come to our own conclusion. Mine from the disappearance side, you're from the 9/11 side.
Perfect.
Yeah,
I'm
it takes some time.
excited. I'm
Yes.
excited. So let's get going. We'll dig right in. You just let me know when you want the pictures up, and when we'll make sure that happens. I'm gonna re remove my spotlight right now, so it's all you.
Wow.
And
Okay. The full
yeah,
screen. Okay. The full screen.
it's all you. All right.
Okay.
So let us know when you want me to put up the
Yeah, and I'm
photo.
going to be asking you some questions as I go. I know sometimes I can go like by myself because I'm used to doing that. But I do want you to jump in, and I want to ask you some questions as I go through this, and then we'll have a good discussion at the end.
Sounds good.
But her name is Snea Ann Phillip, Sneha Ann Phillip. And it is now accepted here in 2024. There's her picture right there. Thank you. That she went missing on September 11th, 2001. And we're going to get into how that has changed since the original story. Something that I like to do, as I already stated, even for the disappearance that I cover for Unfound, I cover a lot of disappearances that are 30, 40, maybe 50 years old. And so what I like to do is go back, if I can, on newspapers.com and see what was written about that disappearance at the time, because we know over time, stories change, people's recollections change, people die. A lot of things can change. So I really like to get that story about what was going on, what were people thinking right then. And this is what I think is interesting about Sneha Phillips' disappearance, because it's kind of changed. And I'm going to get into that. Of course, she disappeared in New York City. Either way, she did disappear from New York City. She was 31 years old. She was a doctor, a real physician. I don't know if she had I guess it would be an MD maybe, but she was married to another doctor. And we're going to be talking about him. And they had no children. I do want to issue a disclaimer, because I know that 9/11 can be very upsetting for all Americans. But as far as the slideshows go tonight, there will be no images on here of anything regarding any violence. This is just regarding Snea. We're not showing any planes or anything like that. So I don't want you to be afraid of watching this video. You don't have to worry about anything like that. I know many people can be triggered by that. We are avoiding that for this presentation.
I
But the
really want
points
to
of learning.
I just want to say thank you for that, Ed,
Yes.
because there are so many times when people will just out of the blue sideswipe you with images,
Yeah.
and some of us, you're absolutely right, and you're really sensitive in this area, and that's what I love about you, that it can be a trigger. So thank you for saying that.
You're very welcome. I totally realize that. I'm the same way. I don't know if I have PTSD, but I know some of the videos, when they do pop up, I get angry. And so I realize other people are affected that way, and even way worse. No reason for that for our discussion tonight. The points of learning tonight that I will go over later are disappearances. Number one, disappearances are about people. Number two, a matter of convenience. And number three, comparing and contrasting. Now, before I get into this, I want to ask Dr. Telesco a question. When was the first time, and if it was just recently, totally fine. I just want you to be truthful. When was the first time you ever heard about Sneha Phillip in any capacity?
I have not.
You had not until I brought her up a few months ago.
Correct.
Okay. And I also want to ask you your perception of 9/11. We know how many police officers and firefighters who were down at the World Trade Centers died when the buildings collapsed. But once again, your perception as being NYPD at the time, how many people who maybe went down there also were killed when the buildings, do you have any perception of that at all from your perspective? Any talk that you ever had, any where it was doctors or accountants or engineers or anybody else?
Well,
What was your perception?
when you say went down there, I'm not
Yeah.
sure what you mean by that. So do you mean that, the first plane hits the first tower and people start going over to the trade center?
Yes,
Is
just
that what you
because, yeah, kind
Well,
of like
I mean,
moths drawn to a flame type of thing. Oh my
right,
gosh,
right. Because I
that,
was there when the first plane hit the first tower. I
yeah,
came out of the battery tunnel. But
right.
probably no one in their right mind, unless they were a firefighter, at that point
Hmm.
would be seeing this as a way in which to assist people or run toward it because I want to help somebody.
Hmm.
Not yet, not yet, not until perhaps um, the towers fell. Like once the towers fell, then I think it became really clear to people what was happening. So
Hmm.
at that point, perhaps doctors, nurses, paramedics,
Hmm.
or anybody else for that matter who felt like they can contribute something to assist others would have gone to the scene. So yeah,
Hmm.
is that possible? Yes.
Okay. All right. So, but your perception, once again, just the way you remember it, is more people were likely to go down there after the buildings fell than contrast to before. Regular
Most
people who,
most definitely. I mean, unless you
okay.
were an innocent bystander and you happened to be walking, waiting for the light, you're waiting
Hmm.
for the traffic light to go across because you work in the trade center or you
Hmm.
work near it. Unless you found some reason for you to be right around Battery Park City,
Hmm.
I don't think that anybody is going to just like flock to the scene um,
Hmm.
at that point.
Okay. All right, you know what I'm talking. I mean, we know that like if a building catches on fire, just something regular kind of fire, we know how people just line up there and stand around and watch. I guess that's what I'm trying to convey
Right,
here.
exactly. You're not
Mhm.
helping. I mean,
Mhm.
I myself, lieutenant on duty, in a department car, there's not a heck of a lot at that point when it's a fire of, on the 100th floor, whatever. There's not much that we can do. So we're going to stand by. But then the situation escalated and it really started unraveling. And then
Right.
once it unraveled to the point of the towers falling, that is when people, I think, came out of uh, a collective shock, if you will,
Mhm.
and were
Okay.
like, oh, I can contribute. Let me go there.
Okay. I want everybody once again. Dr. Telesco was there. I was not. That's why I'm asking her. So let's just remember what she said as I continue through this. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to read about her disappearance. This just comes from Wikipedia. I did check these facts to make sure that they are solid. So I'm just going to go through them. September 10th, so the day before at 4 p.m., Snea signed off and went to drop off some clothes at a neighborhood dry cleaners. Then went to Century 21, not the real estate place, but a clothing store where she used the couple's American Express card to buy lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, and bed linens. Afterwards, Snea bought 3 pairs of shoes at an annex to the store. So she's bought a lot of stuff. A security camera at Century 21 recorded her during the shopping trip. The taped image and the credit card records are the last confirmed records of Phillips' presence anywhere. Lieberman, who is her husband, returned to the couple's apartment after midnight. So we're now past midnight into September 11th, very early on, 12:30 at night, maybe 1 in the morning, and noticed that Snea was not there. He believed she had stayed out all night, as she had been doing, and resolved to remind her the next time he saw her to call him under those circumstances. Lieberman went to bed as he had to get up early the next morning for work. So actually, not the next morning, but later that day. Later investigation found that someone had called Lieberman's cell phone from the apartment at 4 a.m. Lieberman does not remember it, but thinks he may have awoken briefly to check his voicemail. When he got up for work at 6:30 a.m., Philip had still not returned, his wife. That evening, after the September 11th attacks, Lieberman was able to use his medical credentials, he was also a doctor, to get through the security perimeter and return to their apartment. Since the window had been left open, dust from the collapsed towers had accumulated throughout. They lived very close, within 3 or 4 blocks of the buildings. There were tracks in it from the couple's 2 kittens, but none from any human, seemingly showing that Snea had never come back to the apartment after the buildings had collapsed. So she has been missing ever since. Now, the first article that I could find where Snea is mentioned is not until September 22nd, and it's not even I think, from a New York newspaper. And I'm just going to read a very, very small section of it on my screen here once I blow it up here. And it was written by an article. It was really just kind of an editorial. It's from the Cincinnati Enquirer on September 22nd. It's on page 17 of 2001. And I'll just read the section. This is the first time I could find that Snea is ever mentioned. In the horrible days that followed, I was again moved by the people of New York, the people and their palpable sadness. No doubt you have read about the quote unquote missing flyers posted around the city. Seeing these hopeless queries is like attending 1,000 funerals. Your throat hurts. You ache for strangers. I was struck by the names of the missing: Tom Hughes, Doris Eng, Snea Ann Phillip, Alex Brzezinski, Mayra Valdez, Liam Callahan. So that is the first time that Snea is mentioned anywhere, but it's just a random name that this writer, this reporter, decided to include in this article. In no way did she mention her because of any alleged idea that Snea went down there. But already on the 22nd, she's missing in New York City. Snea is missing. And it seems somebody already was thinking, we think that she is missing because of September 11th, even though this is something that came out in the Cincinnati Enquirer. Now, the next article to go into this is an article that came out on September 26th. This is the second mention, and I'm not going to read it all. But what is notable here regarding Snea's disappearance, and this was an interview that contains quotes from both her brother and her husband, is that in this article, the brother lies. So this is 15 days, September 26th. He lies in this article, and I'm just going to read parts of it. So it says, lost in attacks wake. Family fears for city woman missing September 10th. And in fact, in this, there's a picture of her brother holding this picture, or maybe it's her husband. And it says she went missing on September 10th, not September 11th. Keep that in mind. So I'm going to read a little bit of the article. To help find this missing sister, John Phillip negotiated an interview on the street with a television reporter. He held up a photograph of his brave and beautiful sister in the desperate posture taken by so many others so many times since September 11th. And then he lied. It's written right in the article. In the shock and grief, the city had become single-minded, myopic, selfish even, because it had to be. New York was no longer a city of 5 boroughs, but one of 15 acres called Ground Zero. The collapse of the World Trade Center pollinated a million stories, mostly about villains and victims and heroes, as John Phillip turned his sister into one. He told the reporter that Snea Ann Phillip was a doctor who lived a few blocks from the World Trade Center. This much is true, and that she ran into the towers to help after the attack. Her photo was broadcast on TV. The reporter had the story he wanted, and so did the city. Whatever confusion came from this was worth it. The family agreed because Sneha Phillips' disappearance had gotten some attention. So he admits he lied about this so as to just get his sister her attention about her particular disappearance. I'm going to move down the article. Once again, this is from the Newsday Suffolk edition, September 26th of 2001. So it now goes to a quote from her husband. I know we live in a random universe, but is it really that random? Asked her husband, Dr. Ron Lieberman, who has been treating workers at Ground Zero. Remember, he is a doctor as well. Is what happened to her and what happened on September 11th unlucky timing, or is it connected, is what Ron Lieberman said. The police keep trying to lump her in with the missing people from the World Trade Center, he added. I don't know if it's because they don't believe me or they just don't want to deal with anything else. We're losing valuable time. If she's somewhere, we can save her. So you can tell that is a quote. That's all in quotes. It's obvious that her husband, at least at the time, and this is not September 12th or September 13th, but over 2 weeks later, her husband did not believe that his wife went down to ground zero and disappeared. Instead, as you can hear from his quote, he gets the idea that something of what we might call a more general foul play nature happened to her. Not that she was down there and that the buildings collapsed on her, but she might have been out in the city elsewhere, and some sort of, once again, just everyday kind of attack caused her disappearance. His knee-jerk reaction was not that she died in September 11th. And the reason I point these out is because it's weird how these things eventually changed. So I'm going to summarize this. Family and husband initially thought 9/11 covered up the murder of Snea. They complained, as I just read, at least her husband complained she was lumped in with the 9/11 victims. Now, a fascinating topic to me is, now no facts have changed since he said that on September 26th of 2001. Of course, a fascinating thing to me with anything, especially disappearances, since this is my career, is that why do opinions change when the facts don't change? Something to think about. So eventually there were two investigations, one inspired or motivated by her husband, Ron Lieberman, and then another eventually by NYPD once, of course, they got a handle on September 11th and everything else. But that took, of course, a lot of time for them to get to that, understandably. So the first investigation, as it is documented on Wikipedia, and I did look into some things, and there were some things I found elsewhere that are not in the Wikipedia article that I think will be interesting to you. The first one is Ron Lieberman got a private investigator. Since police detectives initially seemed unhelpful to Ron Lieberman, Dr. Ron Lieberman, her husband, and assumed that Philip had died with the other victims. So it seems, at least the way it's phrased here, that the police detectives who were talking to Lieberman thought she did die in September 11th, but there was her husband saying, oh, no, she didn't. Very interesting. Lieberman hired a private investigator, Ken Gallant, Gallant, who found two pieces of evidence suggesting she may have returned to the apartment building early in the morning of September 11th. But remember, there were no footprints inside the apartment. The first was the call from the home phone to Lieberman's cell, which we've already discussed. The second was some videotape from the security cameras in the lobby, time-stamped at 8:43 a.m., just 3 minutes before American Airlines Flight 11 was crashed into the North Tower, and within the 7 to 9 a.m. time frame during which Philip typically returned after her nights out. I'm going to get into these nights out. So she was there was somebody in the lobby at 8:43 a.m. before the first plane hit the first tower. It shows a woman entering the building, waiting near the elevator, and leaving after a few minutes. Due to the poor contrast from the sunlight in the lobby, we know sometimes if the light's coming right at you, you can't see anything. You just see like a shadow or an outline or a silhouette. The woman was visible only in silhouette, but her hair and dress were consistent with Philip as seen in the Century 21 tape from the previous day. Philip's family also says the woman exhibits similar mannerisms. She is, however, not carrying any of the bags. We already went through. She bought a ton of stuff on September 10th. Nobody disputes that. That she would then she would have had from her shopping trip. So she's standing there. Some woman is standing there, but she doesn't have any bags. And again, she is apparently unaccompanied, this one in the video. Lieberman could not positively identify the woman as his wife, but an NYPD investigator believes this was Snea. Of course, this NYPD investigator did not know Snea. So when you're going to pick one, you might probably want to go with the husband over some stranger, whether it's NYPD investigator or anybody else. Now, here are some interesting things that are not that I found. The private investigator who was hired, getting paid by Dr. Ron Lieberman, actually entertained the idea that Snea actually did run off. His first instinct was not that she got killed or murdered like a regular murder, as we would understand it, or that she was murdered due to 9/11 with the buildings collapsing. The PI really entertained the idea that Snea just took off. It should be noted that the items bought were never found, and the woman in the video had no bags with her. No person has ever come forward to say he or she saw Snea that night. And maybe if we could put up on the screen, maybe a picture of that article with, I think it was her brother. Can we put that up on the screen? The next, that's with her husband. Yes. And maybe the next picture with the article. There's the surveillance video that I mentioned. I'll just go through these. Yeah, please go to the next one. That's fine. Totally. That's the video of her. And so you can see down there on the right, just leave it right there. Fantastic. That is the article that was in the Newsday Suffolk edition on September 26th of 2001. That's the article that I was just reading from a few minutes ago. You might be able to find it if you Google it. I have a newspapers.com account, which of course I pay for. I'm not telling anybody to do that, but that's how I found that article. And as you can see, it says September 10th, 2001. And in it, the brother admits lying and the husband admits that he does not think she died due to 9/11. It's very important. It's very important to me. All right, so moving on, and you just leave it the picture right there for now. That's fine. So then, finally, NYPD got around to trying to figure out what might have happened to Snea. Earlier in the year, Cabrini Medical Center had declined to renew Phillips' contract, citing repeated tardiness and alcohol-related issues, effectively firing her. Nobody disputes this. Shortly after she had been informed of that decision, Phillip went out to a bar with other Cabrini employees. The outing led to her spending the night in jail. She complained to police that a fellow intern groped her during that time. The prosecutor investigated the case, dropped the sexual abuse charge, and instead charged Phillip with third-degree falsely reporting an incident, a misdemeanor under New York law. He offered to drop the charge if she recanted the original complaint, but she refused and was held overnight pending release. After a dismissal from Cabrini, Phillip began spending nights out at gay and lesbian bars in the city, some known for their rough clientele. According to police, she would sometimes leave with women she met at these bars. Police also stated that Phillip's brother discovered her and his then girlfriend having sex, which her brother then disputed. He's saying that the investigators, NYPD, is lying. It's up for you to decide who you want to believe. Phillip got another internship in internal medicine at St. Vincent's Medical Center on Staten Island, but was running into similar problems there. She had already been suspended for missing a meeting with a substance abuse counselor. On the morning of September 10th, so the very day that she went out and bought all of that stuff, and that's not disputed. You just saw the picture of her. None of this is in dispute as far as her buying stuff. On that very morning, before you see her buying all that stuff on the video, Phillip had been formally arraigned on the criminal charge and pleaded not guilty. The police report says she and Lieberman fought loudly at the courthouse afterwards about her problems and nights out, which ended with her walking away and leaving him to go home alone and get ready for work. Now, I have no criminal record ever. I haven't even had a speeding ticket. I think the last one I had was like 2006. I'm just so boring. But we have to think about it this way. And Dr. Telesco, of course, you having experience with criminals, I want you to jump in here. Here she is getting arraigned on a criminal charge. She's a doctor, and she decides to go on a shopping spree that afternoon. We talked about victimology and those things. Maybe we can jump in here. What do you think about that, Dr. Telesco?
Well, I mean, so far it sounds like this woman, may she rest in peace, if she is in fact deceased. Question before I go any further.
Yeah.
Were her remains found?
No, her remains have never been found ever.
Okay.
No.
Which half of all of the victims' remains were found. So
that's right.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's kind of was kind of like the rule, if you will, like the exception, in fact, was if remains were discovered. So as you're talking to me, again, remember, like, not only do I have my law enforcement hat, but I've got my social worker, PhD social work hat on.
Right.
And I'm like, issues. There's lots of issues here. It sounds like there's addiction. It sounds like there's confusion, sexual, perhaps sexual ambiguity or confusion. It sounds like the marriage is not healthy. It sounds like maybe she wanted to disappear. That's
Okay.
what it sounds like for at first
Okay.
glance. But you know, the fact that she's frequenting bars that gay bars or whatever. When you said rough crowd, do you mean an
That's
S&M club?
I'm just saying rough clientele. That's what it says.
Oh, so we don't know
I
what
don't
that means. I mean, that could be
a
that
rough
could
part of
just be a
town.
low kind of low class, if you will, bar establishment.
You don't
And
know.
when you're using when you're in your the throes of your addiction, you find yourself in seedier and seedier places. So that's that's not, I think, uncommon, right? But it was it specifically like an S&M bar. There are a couple of those down in the village, but mostly frequented by men, unless it was straight, because there's also the kink, there's the kink
Yeah.
crowd, right? The
Yeah.
kink population. And that can be any sexual orientation. They're just that's their fetish. That's what they get their pleasure from, is S&M and bondage and discipline, stuff like that. But
I, I
when
guess
you
what
say
I'm also
rough
asking
crowd, I'm
you,
just not sure what that means.
I guess what I'm asking you is here she's a doctor. If she was an accountant or a truck driver or something, maybe it would be a little bit. She's a doctor. It's just, where you have to be really trusted. And here she's getting arraigned for a felony. And then in the afternoon, if it were me, I guess, I'd be going home and taking a long look at the choices I'd be making in my life. What am I
Well,
doing? Went to medical school and everything.
well,
And here I am getting arraigned. Here she's going shopping and buying shoes and all this other stuff.
there are many doctors out there, and I'm not going to say of more than not, but
Mm-hmm.
I do know of physicians who have lost their license because of
Yeah.
addiction,
Right.
and whatever means that they had to go through to get the next one, kind of thing, lost their license. You want to think, like, when do you start to wake up? But the disease of addiction is cunning.
Right.
So I don't know if that's what's happening for her, but she got fired. That didn't seem to bother her. She goes to another job. She's supposed to meet a counselor, a substance abuse counselor. She doesn't show up for that. I mean, this to me is all addiction.
Okay. All right. We're going to continue. All right. So we have that. Now, you should know, on the other hand, the family is disputing. His family has said that she was fired from Cabrini for being a whistleblower. I don't know if there's any proof of that. But the fiance's response to all of this, once the NYPD came out with their report, it was not too flattering towards Snea's character, is that Lieberman says that while his wife frequented lesbian bars is because she did not want a repeat of the situation that had happened with her coworker. We were talking about the groping. She never had sex with the women she went home with. Well, I have the big question. Well, how would he know this? I mean, just because he believes it because she told him? I don't know. Was he there? It seems, I don't know. He claims, and they would often merely listen to music, sleep, or paint. This is the story that Snea was telling her husband about her going to these lesbian bars and going home with women. This is, I guess, what he was telling her. She was telling him. One time, in fact, she came home covered with pain after going home with an artist. Phillips' drinking was a temporary phase, Lieberman says, to ease her through the depression she was experiencing after being fired from Cabrini, and would stop once her life got back to normal, as he believes it was doing. He said that she was getting back to normal after this. This is him, but once again, he's saying some things there that I think are just hope. They're not knowledge. I mean, how would he know what his wife did with anybody anywhere else where he wasn't there? He'd just have to take her word. That seems a little shaky. Now, once again, the family, at least her bio family, brothers and others, disputes just about everything the NYPD has said about all of this. So what ends up happening? Now, remember, it was very clear early on that the fiance did not believe she died due to 9/11. It's clear her family was just lying about it just to get attention for her disappearance. But then in 2003, they got together, Lieberman and Snea's family, biological family, tried to get her included in the September 11th compensation fund. So they came together. So went to what they call a probate court. In 2006, it was denied. But then in 2008, it was reversed. And so now she is considered to be the 2,751st victim of September 11th. And if you ever want to go see her name on the memorial that is down there, she is in the South Pool on panel S66. Even though her family from pretty much the beginning did not really believe, at least knee-jerk reaction, that she actually went down there to help anybody, that she was anywhere near the World Trade Centers when they collapsed. And you just heard Dr. Telesco say when we started this, her perception is that most people who went down there didn't go down there until after the buildings fell, not while they were still burning and of course, were on fire. The planes had already hit them. So I'm going to quickly go now to those 3 points that I talked about before, the learning points for this disappearance. Number one, disappearances are about people. And what I mean by that is you tell me the character of a person, you tell me about the relationships, their jobs, if they have addictions, money situations, and everything else. And at this point in my career, I can pretty much tell you how that person went missing. I don't even need to know the circumstances. That's just kind of where we are. And you should know when it comes to predicting what happens in disappearances, I'm over 90%. I'm pretty good at this. So my perception is if Snea did not have all these other problems in her life, like we've talked about, it seems like some sort of marriage issue was there. I'm not here to judge, but it does seem that at least publicly, her husband maybe seems a little naive about the whole thing. But the drinking and these other things, if she didn't have all these problems, I think it would be much more likely that Snea went down to ground zero, one of the buildings before they collapsed, and then got caught up in that. But given that she had these addictions and everything, it really makes everything a bigger question mark. And I have a serious question for all of you. If you found out your doctor has got fired, a possible alcoholic, married, but her husband really, or spouse, I don't care about sexual orientation, her significant other, doesn't know where she is sometimes at night and what this person is doing and spent time in jail, would you want that person to be your doctor? Probably not. Does that sound like a person, given all of that, who would rush down to the World Trade Center? Somebody who had all these issues, addiction, these other things. Does that sound like the type of person who would rush down to help people at the World Trade Center? You have to remember, she would have probably been out all night, probably drinking and other things. Of course, we still don't know what happened to all that stuff she bought. And as I state here, it's very common that families, and you'll notice none of this is talked about in any of the articles, and I don't know if it ever comes up. The families don't like to talk about their missing loved ones' problems. And this really hurts in trying to analyze what happened to a person, whether it's Sneha Phillips or anybody else. Maybe Dr. Telesco, you want to get in here for a second before I go to number two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm curious to know why they were denied at first. Why they were denied. There's got to be something to that because most people were approved. I mean, almost, I don't want to say automatically or immediately, but very soon thereafter. There were. All you had to do was prove that. I mean, even the vicinity, it sounds like they lived in Battery Park City. Is that where they lived?
I don't have it in my notes here, but it just says a few blocks. I mean, 3 or 4 blocks.
A few blocks is probably Battery Park City. And if they were physicians, I mean, I'm very well aware of that whole like complex there. And everyone was evacuated. Everyone from that building was evacuated.
Yeah. And then it even says there that her husband needed hospital credentials or something to get back into his.
That's right. That's right. And
you're probably right.
They didn't want anybody back there, and it was a really long time before people could get back into their houses, if that's where they lived. I don't know, but look, is it possible that she was walking in the street and got caught up? I want to agree with you that it doesn't sound like her so far, her character, that she would want to go volunteer or do something, that doesn't sound like it.
No, it doesn't.
It sounds like there's other things that she's extremely distracted by, which I would say possibly the disease of addiction.
Right. All right. So we're going to move on here, get some more discussion here in a few minutes. So number two, a matter of convenience. And I've experienced this myself, a lot of guests who I've had on Unfound. Too often families default to what story will be most convenient to their disappearances getting attention. And you saw this right here, the brother lying, saying, oh yeah, she rushed into the buildings and everything. There's no proof that that ever happened. He just made it up to get attention for his sister's disappearance. Likewise, the husband originally says, well, she's out in New York City somewhere. He's thinking that, she got mugged, she got raped, she got taken somewhere. Had nothing to do with 9/11 because he thought that was the way to get attention. All you people are, 9/11's bad and everything, but my wife is missing and there may be a killer in our midst who is getting away with this. She might have been murdered. She might have been abducted. And 9/11 is something that's covering it all up. What's important to me is the husband is a doctor. He knows his wife better than anyone, especially being that they're both doctors. They're talking about medical stuff. He did not automatically default to the idea that she went to the World Trade Center, even though he knows her as a doctor, and I think that's how they met. So husband in 2002 says she died but just the very next year, she died on 9/11 at the World Trade Center, and how dare anyone say she didn't? Just within months, the husband changed his tune. So family in 2001, people saw her run into the World Trade Center. That was a lie. It's obvious that early on, the husband and the family had different opinions about who Snea was and what she would do under those circumstances. But what's important is the entire knee-jerk reaction of her family, who knew her best, was not that she went to the World Trade Center. This is, like I said, this is very common. Families will say whatever they think they have to in the moment to get attention for the disappearances. Is also when we go back to point number one about disappearances being about people, is that they don't want to talk about addiction. They don't want to talk about somebody being fired or something else, because then the public perception, the public allegedly loses lack of interest, loses interest in it. I'm not so sure that's the case, but that's maybe for another day. But this is why when I question guests before they come on Unfound, that I try to ask them, these hard questions about things. And this is why that if people are going to come on Unfound, we have to talk about these people honestly. That's one of the criteria for guests being on. So let's go down to number three. And I think this is kind of what Dr. Telesco was saying a couple minutes ago about, well, what about other people? We're going to do a little comparing and contrasting. Two other people who disappeared have been included as being killed in 9/11, even though neither of them were necessarily connected to the World Trade Center. They were not police or anything else. I'm going to read their stories. The Phillips, when they got denied in 2006, the Phillips family appealed, contrasting Snea's case with that of Juan LaFuente, another possible victim whose petition the court's counterpart in Dutchess County, where he lived, had accepted. Like Philip, his exposure to the text is based on circumstantial evidence. He too had recently lost a job and struggled with depression, and as a volunteer fire marshal in Poughkeepsie, might himself had a reason to offer assistance at the World Trade Center. His office was 8 blocks north of the World Trade Center site, but the court accepted testimony from someone who frequented the same local deli, claiming he had overheard LaFuente say he had a meeting at the Twin Towers that morning of September 11th. The court ultimately determined that LaFuente died in the attacks, believing he was in the North Tower when Flight 11 made impact. Phillips' family believes LaFuente's petition was similarly minimal evidence of the alleged decedent's presence at the site of the attacks was accepted primarily because LaFuente's wife, Colette, was mayor of Poughkeepsie at the time, and the case was heard there rather in Manhattan. So it may be even a political reason that Juan LaFuente eventually now is included as being a victim of September 11th and is on a panel just like Sneha Phillips is now. And maybe we want to go to that picture. Maybe we can show Sneha's picture of her panel. Now, there's another story. Fernando Molinar. There it is. Thank you. Fernando Molinar, a Mexican immigrant, has not been seen or heard from since September 8th. of 2021, when he told his mother on the telephone that he was starting a new job at a pizzeria near the World Trade Center. A similar petition to Circuit's Court on his behalf was also rejected, so he did not get included in this, whereas LaFuente did. So what I did was so that's a little, this is number 3, comparing and contrasting Snea with these other situations, these other 2 guys. One got included, one did not. Even though this guy said he was going to be working at a pizzeria at the World Trade Center. That was his new job. So I went to NamUs and I did a search, and I did the search for anybody missing between September 15th or 5th and September 16th in New York or New Jersey. Only one name came up. Sneha Phillips' name does not come up, and neither do these other men who I just mentioned. Only one came up. Her name is Michelle Harris, and that's a very famous disappearance from New York, although not near New York City, where her husband got tried over and over and over for her disappearance and murder. Hung juries, convicted, retrials. I mean, it was really crazy. He was eventually found not guilty. She is still missing, but that's the only disappearance of anyone in New York or New Jersey that is listed on NamUs between September 5th and September 16th. So that's, once again, a little comparing and contrasting. Snea, Juan, and Fernando are not on NamUs. So going back to Dr. Telesco, kind of where we kind of full circle with all of this, something that I asked you very early on, are there any stories of doctors rushing to 9/11 and dying? And it seems, allegedly, that there's only one, Sneha Phillips. Where were those other doctors who also lived in the area who rushed down there and died? Is she the only one? It seems a little unlikely. And if anything else, this is the reason I will go on the record in saying that I doubt that she was down there, because we don't have any other stories of any other doctors in the immediate area being on duty, being at home or anything, rushing down there and also getting killed. We only have one. So that's what ends my notes for this disappearance. Dr. Telesco, maybe you want to talk a little bit, and maybe we have some questions from the audience.
So again, and I know that you made the disclaimer, in terms of the sensitivity of this whole subject.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I'd like to say it again now that if anybody's watching us, I mean, this is public, this is live streamed. It's on our YouTube channel. It'll be archived there, so folks can watch it anytime they want, and you never even know who's watching your stuff. Honestly, know the numbers, but you may not know who. And
Right.
So I want to really again honor the families and the victims, honor them. It's real easy to say definitively someone was there if their remains were found or property was found. Then it's corroborative evidence that they were there. Of course, if they worked there, that's proof too. So you've got the proof that you worked there. But what if you didn't work there? And what if you just were a pizza guy? And you brought up undocumented immigrants. Do you know how many undocumented immigrants were either killed or definitely displaced, that were not eligible and could not receive anything, and also were afraid to come forward because of their status? So there's a whole bunch of things that were happening besides the fact that I work in the World Trade Center and I was killed there, and it's corroborated that I worked there. Or I was walking by when the towers were falling. I was trying to run, but I got caught up in it, in the rubble, and but my wallet was found. So puts me at the scene. Fine. But let's not forget that about half of all of the victims, their remains were never found. So does that mean that half of the victims weren't there? Well, of course, we know that Cantor Fitzgerald and Merrill Lynch and all of these other corporations are going to be able to show you, okay, yeah, this is the list of all of the people that worked here. But what about the undocumented people? What about the dishwashers in the World Trade Center restaurant? They weren't documented, so they weren't, like, nobody knew. They just knew that, by maybe first name. But they may or may not be listed as those who, died. So
Yeah.
again, this is very, very difficult to say what happened to her.
Yeah.
Um, Based on everything you're saying, it doesn't sound like she's one of the folks that like that ran in to assist. It's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely that anybody but a cop or a fireman ran in. It's highly unlikely. Paramedic, possibly. But other than that, outside of that circle of first responders, um, having been at the scene, having been there that day and the year and a half that followed, I could tell you that you weren't running anywhere. You weren't running into anything. Like, and even cops and firemen weren't able to run in and assist, as exhibited by the fact that 300 firemen were killed.
Yeah.
And how were they killed? They were killed because they were in the lobby waiting for instruction when the towers fell without the proper communication. I mean, all of this came out in the 9/11 Commission. I'm not
Yeah.
saying anything that's not true. But back to this particular case, this missing person, I go back to the fact that she had a lot of issues
Yep.
before, and I don't know if she was murdered or if she just wanted to disappear. I mean, who knows? I don't know. But was she the you're saying doctor that ran it? Like, we didn't
Well,
have.
I think what maybe that we have maybe open to the idea that she goes down there and she's trying to care for people maybe that are coming out or being escorted out or coming out, and she's right there like in that block or how many blocks it was, that when the towers fell, she got caught up in it, as many people did who were
But
standing
you
outside, etc.
but you have to remember something. It was a fire for a while,
Yeah.
very high up. Nobody was running in but firemen. And
Mhm.
and then even they were getting to a place where they couldn't go past a certain floor
Yeah.
to assist. We didn't start assisting people until the towers fell.
Okay.
As the towers were falling, we were not even assisting people, but we were helping people
Well,
run over the Brooklyn Bridge
right.
when many
Right.
women lost their shoes. I mean, all of this is
Right.
fact, right?
Right.
But after the towers fell, then there was a lot of triage that was going on.
Mhm. Okay.
But that was after
Gotcha.
the fact.
Gotcha.
So, people had a lot of stuff in their eyes, a lot of debris, a lot of so they were being cleansed at various cleaning stations that paramedics had set up temporarily. Um, there was cuts and scrapes and blood. People were bleeding. So um maybe helping them, but the towers had already fallen then.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no more danger, really.
Yeah.
Imminent danger.
Yeah. Like I said, I like, if this was really a thing with doctors from all over seeing these, and then they're running down there,
That's not the
and,
case. I got to tell
yeah,
you that
and,
right
and
now.
if we had
Like
like
that that's
10,
not what happened. They went to
yeah,
Beekman downtown. They went to St. Vincent's Hospital. They went to Cabrini. That's where they went. They didn't go to the site because at that point it was a fire, major fire
yeah,
in both buildings, and then it was a building collapse.
right,
And the fire happened for a while
yeah,
before the collapse.
yeah.
I don't see a doctor running into the building.
Well,
Not
like I said, not in the building. If she's just outside, like waiting,
waiting
and
for what? Like, so she's
well,
curiosity
waiting maybe
seeker.
for people to be escorted out who smoke
Well,
inhalation and things, and
I mean,
she's
look,
standing there like 100 feet away from the building. She thinks
yeah.
she's safe, and then the building collapses, and you can't outrun it. I mean, by that
Well,
point,
no, you can't. And then in that case, she did die
Mm-hmm.
in the World Trade Center attack.
Right. And
So
that's kind of, I think, the scenario that I see if it's possible. The problem we have, though, is keep going back. It seems like she's the only doctor who did this because we don't have any other stories of any other doctors dying in 9/11 who actually went down there and were standing outside, thinking something like you're saying. Your perception is they were going to the hospitals. They weren't going to the building.
right, and if they're gonna, that
Okay.
doesn't make any sense. Their services aren't needed there at that point. Their services are needed back at the hospital, which is where people were being taken to the
Yeah.
hospital,
Right.
to the various hospitals.
Okay. All right.
I don't
You
know.
were there. You were there. I was not. Like I said, me just thinking through this. If there were like 10 doctors, then I'd think probably it happened. Being that there are none, this is what makes me doubt that she was down there anywhere, whether
Again,
in
I
one of
mean,
the
again, the
buildings or
point,
100 feet
well,
away.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm 100% convinced that she wasn't down there.
Mhm.
I'm not convinced that she was helping anybody, but um, it's certainly possible that she was walking around, maybe dazed, maybe drunk, maybe lost, maybe I don't know what.
Mhm.
Um, they did not evacuate Battery Park City until the collapse happened.
Okay. Do we have
That's
any
for sure.
comments, any questions or anything? Anybody insight into this in the comments tonight?
Yeah, Justin and Layla, anybody making comments? You guys want to come on?
There you go.
Okay.
Hey, I don't
Any comments, Layla, from you or anything that's in the that people are posting?
well in the chat, I don't see any comments or any questions. Everyone's kind of like saying hi. But I
Okay.
think I have a question.
Yeah.
As far as the surveillance camera goes from the private investigator,
Hmm.
like I know the husband was saying that's not her. Do you think that that was her? Like, do you think that she would have went home that day? Like, what do you think about that surveillance?
Well, it's compelling that whoever was seemed to like be waiting for an elevator and then was waiting and then turned away. I mean, why would somebody do that? I live in a building with an elevator. How
Mhm.
many people come up to the elevator and like, well, I'm not going to use it. It seems unusual. It could just be weird timing.
Right.
But who am I to argue with her own husband who knew her inside and out and saw her in all phases of her life, phases of her life? If he doesn't think it was she, then I guess I can't think it was she either.
Okay.
Now that just clarification, that surveillance video or that picture,
Mhm.
that's not a picture of her.
Well, we have a surveillance. We have the picture of her shopping on September 10th is the picture that we showed. I
Let's go
don't.
back to that.
Yeah, go ahead back to that. And that was the day before when she was shopping, and of course she's circled in that right there. There she is. That's on September 10th at I guess a store called Century 21.
I'll tell you
Uh,
that doesn't look like her either. To me, I don't know. I mean, it
Compare,
doesn't.
I agree with you that it doesn't look like the pictures that are like on the Charlie Project and elsewhere, but somehow they got her credit card information and were able to determine that this is she. Once again, I didn't know her. So
Did the husband corroborate that that
I
was her?
guess I guess it would that's accepted fact now. I've seen anywhere that he denies that.
But this is not the surveillance video in the lobby of
No,
their
it is not.
building.
No, the
Okay,
September
that's what
11th
I
was
thought.
next day, and I really don't know if that surveillance has ever been made public. I have no idea.
Alrighty then. Anything else,
Yeah.
Layla? Interesting, right?
It really is interesting as far as and then like happening around 9/11, how it can easily be covered up. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Justin,
Mm-hmm.
anything?
No, I'm just wrapping my head around it like you guys are as well. Like it's really confusing. Like there's a lot of scenarios of what could have happened and like the details prior, it's kind of like I don't really know what happened. Like I could assume this happened, but I don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm just wrapping
Now,
my head around
now we
it.
should state you two were not even born when September 11th happened, right?
No.
Oh, Lord. Layla wasn't.
Layla wasn't. Okay. All right. So one of you weren't. So we're talking about ancient history, but
Justin,
kind of
how
like
old were you, man? How old were you?
I was still in the womb. I was not born yet. I
You
was
weren't
born
born
like
either. You were in the womb. So, you guys
after
were like
everything.
little cherubs waiting to come out.
yeah.
That's
Wow.
awesome. Well,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
And so 9/11 is now what it was when I was young, when I was your age, and we were listening to older people talk about Pearl Harbor,
Right.
right? And it was like beyond our comprehension. Like we knew it happened. I mean, there were so many people that knew the date of the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. And I'd be like, really? I don't know. Where was I in history class or something? But
Yeah.
because it wasn't, I couldn't identify with it. I was too young. So the same thing I
Yeah.
think with 9/11. But let
I
me tell you
feel
two stories. I'll
Go
tell you
ahead.
2 quick stories. So, my job for the whole year and a half was helping the victims to navigate a couple of things, various services, if remains had been found, to get it to them, to notify them, and to bring them down to ground zero by ferry so that they could see it up close, up close and personal, because there was a lot of shock and there was a lot of denial that, oh, my loved one, no, my loved one was able to escape. They're just missing, right? And then they just like didn't want to give up on their person.
Yep.
So we started to take, this was Mayor Giuliani's idea, was to start taking people by ferry down to the site so that they could see it for themselves, that no one who was inside of that building when it collapsed could really survive it. Like once you see it, you knew that, right? So we had a guy, and it came to my attention. They referred him to me. This guy's name was Patrick. And Patrick said that his partner was in the building and was really seeking all of the services that one would get. A family was entitled to. In fact, there was a memorial that we had in November. So September 11th happened, and in November we did a memorial. The city did a memorial for all the families and gave them a flag, an American flag, and an urn that contained debris from the site. It wasn't remains, it was debris from the site, but it was something for the families to have. Patrick was one of the family members that I personally gave the flag and an urn to. Come to find out, about 3 or 4 months later, and it hit the news, the FBI investigated this guy and determined, I guess it was the Crime Victims Compensation investigation, because he was trying to get the money.
Yeah.
That he didn't even have a lover. Like, he was making up a name. There wasn't a person. It was nobody. So that's one story. The other story is a guy that was in a bad marriage, was trying to get out. He was in love with somebody else, was having an affair, and he disappeared himself. So he just disappeared saw this as an opportunity to disappear. Of course, he was found later on, living another life with that woman. And, there's a lot of really strange things that were happening around this big crisis. And so I'm not surprised that, hey, listen, if she was in fact there, and apparently an investigation was completed and determined that she was there. Otherwise, she wouldn't be getting the compensation. The family wouldn't be getting the compensation. So they won the case, which means that some authorizing body said, yeah, she was there. So if she was, and they're saying she was, it's just, you're shaking your head. You don't believe it.
It seems really dicey. Like I said, it really seems really dicey to me. It doesn't seem there's not even, of course, we deal a lot with circumstantial evidence on Unfound. We don't talk too much about DNA and things like that. And certainly, given that I'm used to working with circumstantial evidence and trying to figure out what happened in some of these disappearances, there is not even any circumstantial evidence to believe that she was down there at the World Trade Center. There's nothing. There's just an idea.
Well, not really,
and I
because
think
not really, not if she lived 2 blocks from there.
Well,
not really.
Then yes, then the issue is, well, what's too far? Then it's 3 blocks too far, 4 blocks too far. The fact is, how many people if they lived in this Battery Park place, how many of them died on 9/11 by going down there? That's what I'd want to know.
Well,
we don't know.
we can find that out. Not everybody who died in the World Trade Center and are listed as victims worked there.
Yeah.
I know for a fact, because he was one of the first bodies that were recovered, a 20-year-old kid, Bob McIlvaine. He didn't work in the World Trade Center. He worked for Merrill Lynch, and there was a breakfast meeting at the World Trade Center restaurant. It was his first day on the job, and he was handing out his job at 8:30 in the morning was to put all of these folders, like kind of like, like a production, like a program manager, a project manager, like Justin and Layla, and their age, by the way, put out all these folders onto a big conference room table. Then the plane hit. He's one of the first bodies that were recovered. He didn't work there, but he happened to be there. But there would be, but there would be.
The thing is, though, he had a reason to be there, and
right.
with Snea, I'm not sure she had a reason to be there.
I don't know. She didn't live in Brooklyn. She didn't live in Brooklyn, and in Brooklyn, we still had dust all over our cars.
I bet. I know.
So she was right. If she was a few blocks away, like I'm thinking a few blocks really means across the street kind of thing to where Battery Park Complex is. If she lived there, it's very possible that she was walking around and was just distracted or whatever happened and maybe got caught up in it. I don't know. I don't know. But the fact that her body wasn't found, no remains were found, and not even any jewelry or identifying, because don't forget, bodies may not have been found, but rings were found.
Yeah.
Wallets were found. There were certain things that were found that could link you to, who this was. And you're saying that nothing was found.
Nope. Nothing at all. And
so,
it was just going, like I said, I think the reason she got included is just because, like I said, she lived near there and went missing. I think that's it. And that in my world, that's not very convincing to me to think that, somebody, met with an accident or, which I know it's murder. I know all those people were murdered, but, some place where she just happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time where she wasn't really supposed to be because she had no business there.
No you're a journalist. You're a researcher. So did you find out if there's like of the victims, like what were their demographics? Did they work there? Did they live near there? Like what?
The only thing that I looked into in preparing for tonight's show was trying to find out if there were any stories of any doctors in the area that when they saw what happened, went down there to try to help, not go into the buildings, but be outside. If somebody needs immediate help, an immediate diagnosis or anything else, I could find no one. Did I find nurses who died? Yes, but they all had business there that day. There is actually a list of medical people who died, but they all of them had business there. They were there for one reason or another. They were in the medical field, but they were there for some other reason. They weren't anybody who went down there once the planes hit and decided to go down there and, hey, I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm ready to help out. I'm going to stand here on the curb until somebody says they need help. I couldn't find anything like that. And so that's why I'm doubtful.
There's a lot of questions, but it's really good.
I should say one more thing. This actually turned into a Law and Order episode where it turned out that a guy did use 9/11 to murder his wife, put her purse and some things down at Ground Zero to make it look like she was down there when the buildings collapsed. Of course, they ended up in the end figuring out that he actually had murdered her. But
that wasn't based on a true story. That's just a Law and Order episode.
It was based on Sneha Phillips' disappearance.
Yeah. But why? She wasn't, but why?
You know how there's Law and Order people, they take ripped from the headlines, woman goes missing or something. They certainly, if you were to see that episode, you'd say, oh yeah, this is certainly something that had to do with
I got to look it up. That's your homework tonight, Justin and Layla.
I forget what it's called. But yeah, that was, it's like it's like I said, in the mid 2000s or something. It was when it came out.
All right. Yeah. Well, Ed, as always, fascinating. More questions than answers, but lots of facts. So we see you next time, next month. What are we looking at? Did we decide?
I don't have it in front of me. I think,
but I bet Justin and Layla know.
Yeah, maybe they have it on their list. I do not have it in front of me. I think we're planning to do an unfound disappearance. I just don't know if we're going to do a solved one or an unsolved one. I think that's.
They're looking it up right now.
Looking it up.
Look at him in his graduation outfit.
Yeah, look at it.
Go ahead.
I believe we're doing on Crystal. I forgot her last name. Crystal Morrison.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a solved one. Yes, we're doing solved disappearance. One of the first ones that was ever solved after I started the podcast. Yeah.
Excellent. And that's next month,
That's
February.
That's
date?
next month, February 8th.
February 8th.
Okay. Wow,
Okay,
that's
so
gonna be a
that's
quick
fast.
couple weeks. Wow.
Quick turnaround. So
Okay, great.
we'll be working with you behind the scenes around that for that. Thank you, Ed,
Great.
for being with us. Any let's do a shout out, please. Shameless plug for your show.
Yeah, I will. We got tomorrow. Have an episode coming out at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's kind of a little different one. It wasn't a structured interview. It was a more of a conversation with the brother of a woman who went missing in my former hometown of Las Vegas in 2014. And it's more of a behind the scenes of what families have said to me over and over and over about their dealings with police and trying to get attention. So it's not as fact filled as it usually is, but this is like the first time I've given like a behind the scenes of people really a family really complaining about things, and I thought it was time to do that. And her missing woman's name is Irma Merketjan. She's Armenian, and her brother David is the guest.
Okay, excellent. Well, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Unfound. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice. And thanks, Ed. We'll talk to you again real soon. I'm going to stop your spotlight right now so that I could spotlight, if you don't mind, Layla and Justin. Maybe Layla, you want to tell us about what's left in January, and then Justin could tell us what's up for February. How's that?
Perfect. All right, guys. So our next show is on the 25th. So next week is going to be the day in the life of a 17th Judicial Court judge, and that's going to be with Judge Catalina Avalos.
Awesome. Awesome. Don't forget to tune in for that. Investigation with Dr. T. Justin, who's up in February? We got 3 guests, right?
Yes, in February we have 3 guests. We're starting off on February 1st with Hands Where I Can See Them featuring Sheriff Wayne Ivey. After that, we have Ed Dentzel coming back on February 8th for Unfound Cases. And then lastly, on February 15th, we have an inside look at our legal systems featuring Greg Rossman.
And he's the legal consultant for the Davie Police Department, who we actually met in person. We met Judge Avalos in person too, and pressured her into being a guest. No, we didn't pressure her. She said yes very willingly. But anyway, I want to thank Justin Campbell and Layla Horton, my production team, the people behind the scenes that make it all happen. You know, it's like, watching how the sausage is made. And that's Layla and Justin. That's what they do. All right. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and be safe. And we'll see you next time on Investigation with Dr. T. Thanks, everyone.